Do that. There you go. Okay, I'll hand you over to Mark. Take it away.
Perfect. Guys, look, thanks to see everyone. Can everyone see my screen being shared? Is that on there first?
Yeah.
Cool. Good stuff. Guys, I know we've got this in meeting rather than webinar, and I think that's good. We can interact sort of as much as everyone wants. Do feel free, have your cameras on, off, generally be unmuted, but do raise your hand if there's questions and bits I go through that you want to cover again, or there's something specific to your company. I think with this number, we can be a bit more interactive. And if not, pop bits in the questions or the chat. I will try and I'll try and keep on top of it. But do otherwise raise your hand, and we'll sort of do it as we go along. I'd like to thank everyone for having me here today. This cross sort of chamber working and the interaction I've had with Max and the sort of Staffordshire guys and the other chambers of commerce as well has just been great. You know, we're as I am, I'll give my full introduction as a minute, but as a slightly different chamber of commerce than what you maybe know in your local areas, it's great the interaction we have and for me to be able to showcase what's happening in Egypt. And obviously from the important side for you guys is how that can benefit your company, whether it's a country you've looked at before and want to expand into, maybe find new partners or distributors or so on, or whether it's a country that you've never looked at before, never thought of, and I can sort of start in this process of giving you an overview of what the hot topics are and how to work in Egypt, and a bit more about us as me from the Egyptian British Chamber of Commerce can answer those questions and help you gain some traction in that market. Before I do the introduction, a bit of what we're going to pop through today, it's going to be quite a rounded, real overview of what's happening in Egypt. I'll introduce ourselves, what we do, an overview of Egypt from the sort of the government numbers wise. You can see it's a bit of the boring sort of part of this is the overview of what's happening in Egypt. I'll then go into what we see as a chamber of commerce, what we see as sort of these SMEs and the work we do with other chambers of commerce and how those opportunities can be presented to companies that work in this network. It's not all about just presenting mega projects to huge companies, but there's space in all these countries for companies of all sizes. And what I'm here is to showcase what that is, hopefully for your company, and not only to do that, but how we can help you take advantage of those opportunities and continue that relationship into the future, and maybe not just Egypt, but beyond into Africa and the Middle East. We'll look at some of the key sectors as we see it that are growing in Egypt, how to work there and find the partners. It's always difficult into a new country, especially if you haven't worked outside Europe, these sort of customs and transitions into these markets, and we'll help you with that. And then Cargo X, if we'll have an overview of these trading systems. There may be people on the call. We'll ask later at the time if people have heard of it or they've used it, but it's a piece of software that's used for you to trade in Egypt, taken over from a lot of the posted paperwork. And it's one of the key elements if you're going to export to Egypt, that you have an understanding of this system. And we do a 3-hour course on that. It's quite simple to use, but just systematic. So I'm going to go over some of the highlight points now of onboarding to it and how it works. And then we'll go to any questions if people have any really specific questions from their company. Okay. So a little introduction from myself and what the Chamber does. So the EBCC, the Egyptian British Chamber of Commerce. So we are a non-for-profit, we're a non-government organisation with the sole mandate to promote trade and investment between the UK and Egypt. We do that for a number of events like this, other webinars that are more sector specific, from trade missions, both going out to Egypt and from Egypt back to the UK, and then working one-on-one to companies. The big thing that we're working on at the minute we've found has been to key benefit is get to know companies, express, sort of talk about what you do. We can sort of find what the interest is and the uptake, and then matchmaking you to potential opportunities out in Egypt. And when I look at the big sectors in Egypt at the moment, hopefully that'll be more apparent what we're working on and how you can get involved. We are, as with the people that put you in touch with us today, they are one of the 52 local chambers of commerce around that cover the whole of the UK. There are 75 international chambers of commerce. I'm not sure if you've had interactions with those. There's Egypt, Mexico, France, all around the world. As a group of all under the British Chambers of Commerce, we look after over 50,000 UK businesses. So a lot of the work I I do with the local chambers of commerce is obviously present in Egypt, but I get the same amount of interest from Egypt wanting to come and export or to buy from the UK as well. So part of what we're looking at is how you can export to Egypt, but if you buy or you buy products or anything or services or sell them, we'd like to have the opportunities as well to present what Egypt has to offer to the UK, and we'll sort of come back to that later on and the help that can have. Another key part of what we do as a chamber around from that is the legalization of documents. So any of your documents and your processes, whether it's certificates of origin, whether it's contracts, medical documents, anything like that you send into your chamber, we collect up all of those documents from the chamber network. They come into us. We go to the consulate in Egypt at least twice a week to process those documents and then pass them back. So we're well versed in trading for over. We've been doing that for over 42 years, I think. Not myself, but the chamber. So we're well versed in the type of documentation, the requirements, and if you're opening talks or looking to do business in Egypt, what those requirements will be, and if you're on the right track or not. And a little bit of myself, I am Mark Lawrence. I'm the General Manager at the Egyptian British Chamber of Commerce. I've been working here for around 5 years in different aspects, from a consultant, sort of all the way through to helping with the marketing to the events, and now sort of running the whole team down in London. We are slightly different from most of the international chambers of commerce, as we are based in London rather than out in country. That gives us a different perspective, and the close relationship we have with DBT in Cairo, we support them. We look at it in the way of, we cast the net, we do events like this to showcase Egypt. We bring all those together, talk them through the opportunities, and then work with DBT and our partners in Egypt to disseminate that information there. So we feel we have a unique perspective, and something that's of great value to British businesses as well. Most of my team are from Egypt, in particular Cairo. They speak the language, they know the customs, they know all the businesses out there as well. So we hope you get the best of both by working with us. And we are a complementary service to your local chamber of commerce. We're certainly not in competition or do the same services. We are completely different from what we supply. And with the interest in the different countries and in Egypt, working with us along with your local team really gives you the best of all aspects. And we work very closely with all the UK chambers of commerce. Okay, a little bit of Egypt overview. Some of the big numbers of what happens in Egypt just in general trade. So in 2023, there was a total of 4.7 billion of total trade in both directions, of which 2.7 was the UK exporting over to Egypt. A lot of this is service-based. We'll look at that a bit more in a second. And 2 billion of imports. Now, a lot of the imports range around fruit and veg and sort of other service-based ones coming this way. And we'll look at those in a bit more detail in a moment. There's a huge population. I was just on a call before this, and I think since this was given at the end of 2023, they're now to 115 million population. And it's such a wide and diverse economy in Egypt. There's no one particular sector propping up the market or that they're in key of. So it's whether it is in infrastructure, education, or across the board, there's lots of opportunities there, and not one that's particularly leaned on that's going to cause the economy more problems if it was to fail. Some of the other key aspects of working in Egypt, it's only a 1 to 2 hour time difference, depending on the time of year. At the moment, it's 2 hours. So very easy to be in contact, to speak with suppliers there. And only a 4 to 5 hour flight, London to Cairo. And there's flights up and down the country. Egypt Air run out of Egypt, and there's direct flights from Scotland as well. And sort of what this showcases, a lot of, you'll hear about Egypt in the future, is direct competition that they're being able to give to India and China. But those different aspects of a shorter flight time, a shorter time difference, and the level of English out in Egypt is quite incredible. There's a lot of call centers outsourcing now to Egypt. So it's bringing their country into sort of this direct comparison. If you're looking to outsource or offer or outboard your services, whether accounting or IT, it certainly makes Egypt a great place to do business in comparison to those. relatively cheap to fly there. I think around £300 is a sort of return flight to Cairo, to London, so it's pretty accessible. EasyJet now fly direct to Egypt as well. So if it is about getting on board to go and visit and create partnerships, it's very accessible. Some of the top, I said this is some of the just government figures. We'll rip through this really because it's just an overview of sort of the numbers of the imports and exports. A lot of it is your common sort of exports from the UK. These are your high level ones, your big numbers. The UK goods being exported, look, metal ore and scrap, railway equipment, railways and infrastructure in Egypt has been huge. In particular, there's hundreds of miles of monorails being built and other transport networks. The roadways they're building and new mega cities out in Egypt is just stunning. And we'll come back and look at that. But that's what's propped up a lot of the exports. And sort of the other way, again, what was surprising, what's quite interesting with Egypt is the fruits and vegetables are on both imports and exports. And there's a lot I know in Scotland, and I'll pop on to my next slide. In Scotland, there's big imports and exports on potatoes. Actually, strawberries going to Egypt. And now, for reasons we'll come on to in a little while, the exporting of goods from Egypt have become, there's a great appetite for it in the UK. With economic reasons, they've become a lot cheaper to buy from recently and to outsource to. And we've seen that it's just looking at the dispersions of where the goods are coming to and from in the UK. Again, it's a nice spread. They're not dependent, and the things that they import is very diverse. It's across the board, so it's not in one particular sector. So we feel it's a great place to do business because it is multi-sector. There are particularly better opportunities in certain sectors, but something available for everyone. I think this sort of graph of the distribution shows that one. Again, on the services, I think this just the last of the government points that I wanted to bring up is showing transport and the infrastructure is one of the core topics that is happening out in Egypt at the moment. There are opportunities aplenty for in infrastructure, and also in tourism. The redeveloping of a lot of the coast and some bits we'll look at. Anything in tourism or the supporting anything supporting around that is in hot demand. And before I move on, one of the things, the UK is the biggest foreign direct investor into Egypt from anyone in the world, and has an incredible long-standing relationships across all sector. Now, the barriers to entry on trade rules and so on are very, very low to Egypt, and is very encouraged. All of the in-depth webinars and speaking to government and the opportunities they arrive, the UK, they very much sit at the forefront to promote and to do business with. And so they see the UK as such an important partner, and the government level there is so strong that anything good or bad that you need help with, the government are there to support and have direct access to the highest levels out in Egypt. Okay, right, those are the bits of what I sort of call as the sort of more boring bits, the headline numbers from government that sort of gives you the bit that doesn't really help small businesses or the things that we do as a chamber, but gives you an overview of here's the general feel of what's going on. I know very few businesses, myself personally, that are winning multi-billion-pound contracts, but I know lots of them that form part of the underneath of that. And that's what we look at as a chamber, is how we can get part of these big projects that are happening. So March was a big month for Egypt. I know we're gonna, I'm sure, have a lot of questions from everyone here about sort of the economy and what's happened, and payments and foreign FX currencies and difficulties and things they've seen in the news. And I'll cover all of them. I think we're happy to look at all of this front on, and I'll give this perspective of the chamber and the sort of government as best I hear. But from the news we've been seeing coming out in March, it sort of has changed everything in a big way very quickly. It's not to mark that everything's free and clear now and wonderful and jump straight in with Egypt, but it's allowed for the grounding and the sort of the green shoots for everything to start building upon, which I think now, if you are thinking of doing business in Egypt, it lays the groundwork to start looking at it now, for then in 6 months or beyond to really feel the benefits of that. So there was a $35 billion investment into Egypt from the UAE to redevelop the north coast along the Mediterranean. Now, this led to them being able to run a lot of different things in the economy, to tick a lot of boxes in the economy. So it allowed them to float the Egyptian pound, which I think, if you've seen it, a lot of question we get is there's been a lot of devaluations over the last year of the Egyptian pound against the British pound. And this has meant that the UK is more expensive for that, and people asking deals if you already export out to Egypt. But by this investment coming and then being able to then freely float the Egyptian pound, it's led to a stabilization of the economy, which has meant upgrades from rating agencies like Moody's and Fitch. Now it's led to being able to tick all the boxes of the IMF to further increase loans then from the IMF. It's then, on news that I just received on Sunday, actually, it was the second tranche of that 35 billion, the further 20 billion. Part of it's been used to pay down some of the debt in Egypt, and the rest has been used to create liquidity in the foreign FX market for people looking to import from countries around the world. And I've already seen that with our members that export, that have had difficulties with maybe receiving money over the last year to 2 years. We've seen those wheels starting to turn. And actually since on Sunday, it's now moved into the non-essential goods that this foreign currency is available for. Up until now, in the last sort of 5 to 6 months, they've had enough liquidity to the medical devices, the food, the required imports to run the country. But this has led now to it being able to move beyond that, and for any sort of imports. And it will slowly happen. So if you have imports waiting and you haven't been paid, or it's on, this will start happening now, and we'll help you through that. It's reported that in 24 and 25, they're looking at it's just been upgraded actually to 4.5% GDP growth in 24-25. There's high levels of inflation in Egypt at the moment, and over the last year, a lot more than in the UK. But with this news and the floating of the pound and the well documented by the Egyptian government of problems that they had over the last few years, and learning from the mistakes, is leading to them to understand it a lot more. I hope they're not going to hit any of those mistakes again. And we've already seen over the last 2 reports, inflation starting to ease, and the medium term outlook is very good, especially for inflation sort of coming down. And again, I'm not saying that we've passed a point now in Egypt and let's go. It's still to come in with caution. It's by working with sort of us and your local chambers of commerce that will help you guide through any of these problems, or if there's questions or concerns with working in Egypt, we can look at that on a more sort of one-to-one basis with companies. And yeah, like I said, this second tranche of the 20 billion from the UAE has the foreign FX allocations outside the essential goods is huge for these small, medium companies that maybe deal in the sort of 10,000s to $500,000 sort of US dollar shipments. It's allowed these to start moving. I've heard of a lot of that happening already. Cool. So from our point of view, and what we're seeing and what we're hearing as the chamber, and the things we're working on based upon the opportunities we're seeing, the tenders that we're seeing, and the uptake of purchasing from UK companies, and the documentation we're seeing come across our desk, is these five key sectors. Infrastructure being by far the biggest. Now, we just finished a webinar this morning on infrastructure. And we had some great speakers from Gafi, who's the investment authority out in Egypt, talking about their roadmap to building Egypt back in the future is starting with the infrastructure. They've built a new administrative capital. They're spending tens of millions of US dollars on creating a new landscape in Egypt, the buildings, roadways, monorails, in anything for sort of holidays or that sort of network to invite more people to come over into Egypt. They're really focusing on making Egypt a more investable place. So then the other sectors they hope will come and fall in behind that. So infrastructure is huge. Education, there's a massive demand in education at the moment. They're making a big push on opening the doors in particular to UK institutions. And it's not only just universities, but to schools and to the other sectors around that, whether it's ed tech or anything around the institution. They want UK universities and school instructors to open up what they call branch campuses, so that we've got people like Exeter that are moving out. Hertfordshire already have campuses over there. They want to be able to give Egyptians a UK education without having to leave Egypt, with their plan being that then they will stay in Egypt at the end and work on all the other sectors of knowledge local. So we run huge missions out based around education. Agriculture, with the dropping in the devaluation of the Egyptian pound, it's made purchasing from Egypt very cheap. It's made exporting to Egypt more expensive for the Egyptians, but the UK is seen as very, very high quality. Like I said earlier, being one of the key partners, it's seen as very, very high quality products. And when they're looking for the best, they do naturally look to Egypt. The inquiries we get of buying from the UK or selling to UK is absolutely huge. Now, in agriculture, with the devaluation, it's become a lot bigger market to export more of their products. So with that booming agriculture in Egypt, it's left a lot of space for them to onboard more machinery, more fertilizers, more everything that goes with running agriculture in a country. So it's left space for UK companies to export this sort of what's seen and what's known as some of the best machinery in the world. And because that's starting to boom there, it's allowed us to balance that. It's more expensive than the UK. We do want the best quality because this is the future agriculture. There's so much potential money in it now by exporting to countries like the UK. There is space for UK companies there. And in outsourcing and manufacturing, there are huge government incentives for both, whether it's you outsourcing call centers, outsourcing accounting for small and medium-sized firms, to open up factories out in Egypt, many free zones in Egypt, many incentives for you to employ local representatives out in Egypt. And everything that goes with that. It's a great roadmap and presentation. So anyone here, I mean, I'll happily follow up with all of you post-call to discuss in more sort of detail what your company does and what the opportunities are there for you in that industry. But in particular, if there's things for outsourcing and potential manufacturing in the area, there is just huge red carpet down and great introductions we can make to help you at least learn. And I'd love you to take a look at Egypt to sort of see what the opportunities are there for you, and I can help guide you through and meet the right people to look to make that happen. Okay. How to work with Egypt and finding partners. So I don't know here, we'll open up the floor in a bit before we go on to anything Cargo X. But working in new countries is always difficult, especially if you don't know people on the ground. Obviously, I get a lot of calls from people that have heard there's an opportunity in Egypt. They've started to Google it. They've spoken to a couple of companies, rung a number and tried to speak to someone. Language barriers, sort of the cultural differences between the UK and Egypt aren't far off, but there's certain ways to do business and ways to introduce yourself and ways things like pricing work and best price and sort of discounts and so on comes together with Egypt. So we found the important role that we play is verifying if you already have partners there, or there's someone that you want to attach is speaking to us or one of my team to sort of have a look at that company. We can find out a bit more about them. How are they seen in the market? Do we know of them before? Are they recommended? Has anyone had any troubles with them before? Or in the most case, what are the great success stories people have had with them before? my team and the guys giving you that knowledge of how things work in Egypt, whether it's on a language barrier, if it's a smaller company, generally English in Egypt's quite incredible, actually. They speak English better than I do in most cases. And being able to help you penetrate into those new markets for you and offer you that feedback and advice is the first sort of point of call. And whether it's us finding you those partners or you finding them as us and helping you expand, we're here to help. Pitching your product to the right people at the right time as well. Like I said, the UK is seen as very high quality products, and they are known for that. They are known to be expensive as well. So it's us pitching and creating you, putting you with the right partners out there at the right time is key. And we've got a great partnership with UK Export Finance that when they pick up big projects in Egypt, and at the moment they're funding the building of the Afrexim Bank headquarters out in New Cairo in Egypt. And they've come to us for us to help fulfill the whole project. So working with UK Export Finance, we've gone in, we've tried to find all of the different suppliers built in that, whether it's for concrete, whether it's for curtain walling, down to sort of HVAC systems or anything that's involved in the infrastructure project, and aiming that towards the UK. So part of what we do is to override the difference in price in the UK is with UK Export Finance. Now, if you don't know too much about them, it is that they'll fund projects in another country, like this Afrexim Bank, and part of them issuing that funding is that they need to spend 20% of that project on UK companies. So on this big infrastructure project, maybe $100 million project, they're going to need to spend $20 million of that in the UK, and that's where we come in to help them move their eyes towards the UK. And those sort of projects are underwritten by banks and UK Export Finance, giving you this sort of a surety of being paid on time and how it works in your contracts. And then finally on this bit, going in the other direction, this purchasing from Egypt has just become much more accessible. So whether you do buy in products yourself, whether it is in agriculture or IT or basically anything, to be able to, I'd love everyone to have a look at Egypt, maybe compare it to the other markets I said before in India and in China, and see what other advantages now Egypt offers, whether it's on the time difference, more accessible, language barriers, shorter flight times, and now the level of education and the demographic in Egypt, I think has put it as a country to really compete with what's generally seen in the rest of the world as cheap countries to work with. Now, I feel affordability-wise, Egypt works on that level, but has a lot more advantages. So I think taking a look, speaking to us about what opportunities there are for you to potentially buy from Egypt, we'd love to work with you on that. My next part is, I'm keen on time, okay, we can rattle through it a bit, is we're going to look at the CargoX system. But before that, are there any questions on sort of the overview I've given there? Are there any questions specific from companies, maybe before we get into the software side and the actual, this is how you work the systems and trade? Are there any other questions maybe specific for any of your industries or questions about things you've had with Egypt in the past? Okay, I'll take that I quite well covered it, but hopefully if there are any other questions or what, like, I'll give all my details out after, and hopefully that part of the presentation sort of just whet the appetite of an overview of what Egypt is, how it's changing now. There's been a lot of bad news the last few years, and I'm happy to sort of head that front on, especially now we've got this good news and the work as a chamber we've seen of partnerships happening now and deals happening in both directions. We see it as a real positive, and we hope that any bad news or things you've seen in the past, and now we're happy to answer the questions on them, and then we're learning lessons and won't be sort of looked at again, and yeah, drive some opportunities for everyone here today. Okay, so CargoX, I guess if we're all exporters here and we already work in export around the world, and maybe you've dealt with Egypt for many years, or maybe you're new to it now. It was around two years ago, 2 and a bit years ago now that they implemented a new system, which is the ACI system, Advanced Cargo Information System, which overtook from the need of sending actual papers in the post over to Egypt per trade basis, having to wait for them to appear, maybe with letters of credit or so on coming back the other way, and all those difficulties. So they wanted to create one system, and I'll go into what this is in a moment. And a link between Nefeza and CargoX was created to run all of this documentation, so that you don't need to now sort of post it a lot. I'll give an overview of this. There's lots of acronyms involved, and I know when I was learning it and when I've taught it for people for, it's the acronyms that sort of that generally throw people off because it all becomes quite tricky quite quickly, and when it doesn't make sense. But I think a little bit of learning on the underlying what it is and what it does and why it is gets you there a lot quicker. So the ACI, the Advanced Cargo Information, this is the new customs procedure. And what you'll normally get asked for is this ACID number, which is an Advanced Cargo Information Declaration number. We'll look at this in a moment, but that's basically what links everything together. The idea of this system is to replace all paper documentation that ever existed before, and to have it in one place on one screen in Egypt so they can see everything that's happening from all around the world. With the idea that it protects Egyptian citizens, because it allows them to risk monitor everything around the world. They can see what's coming in and out, if there's any problems with trade, where it is, what it is, if there's illegal imports, be able to pinpoint it and be able to use these systems to help customs identify problem shipments more quickly, which then the idea, if they can do that, it will speed up release times. Imports, which hopefully helps everyone from all around the world. And if you imagine from the point of view of the whole world sending in these papers, all nearly 200 countries, a system like this is going to free up so much time and cost that as it comes in and it's now fully bedded in, I think it's going to free up a lot of time and make trading with Egypt a lot easier. Okay, so now these acronyms and what's involved, because there's a few different segments involved in this. So the whole idea of this system came about from MTS, which is the technological arm from the Ministry of Finance. Now, what they wanted, rather than all this paperwork, was basically to be able to have one screen on a wall in their sort of trading war room that showed everything that's going on. And so with that idea, they wanted to automate everything that was going on there. Like, we can't do this with papers anymore and this around. There's got to be a better way. And where they were quite a long way behind in Egypt on the systems that they used and they've jumped sort of to the forefront of technology and systems that are put in place around the world. And so they created a project codenamed Nefeza. So this Nefeza might be something you'll hear of when you deal with your partners in Egypt. It's something you'll never log in, you will never use that system, but it's what your importer in Egypt will use. It stands for the National Single Window for Foreign Trade Facilitation. Doesn't quite work with the acronym, but that's what it is. And this is the system that the importer will use. They will ask you for certain information on the trade. It will be the port of entry, it will be the codes for the trade, what's involved in it, the timings, the cost price, the invoices, and they feed it all into this system. It then goes for approval in Egypt, and when that's approved, it's what generates the ACID number. Yeah, so that's what happens. It's nothing you'll see, but that's just an overview of what's involved with them. And I'll say it a couple of times, but if you're working with a new importer in Egypt and they haven't heard of Nefeza, then you won't be able to trade with them. They're the only ones that can log on to this system. They're the only ones that can use it. They will ask you for certain information that you will give for them to create the trade, but you'll never have a login, and only they can use it. And actually, when the importer logs onto that system, they go through a similar way of onboarding that I'll show you in a moment. They verify themselves. They do a lot of self-certification on that to gain the trust of the government to be able to import products. The ACID number as part of the ACI. Okay, so this is always a 19-digit number. It takes no more than 48 hours to create. Because obviously, if it gets approved, if it doesn't get approved by the importer name because they've put in some information wrong or it's outside of scope, it can take longer. But generally, you've given the information, it should take no longer than 48 hours. They are valid for 6 months after issuance as well. So if you've been working with Egypt for a while or you're new to it, you will find that there's a good sweet spot of when you start applying for these ACID numbers. Because obviously I've worked with companies that have done it way in advance, and by the time it gets to the actual trade, the trade's changed, and actually they're not having all of the items we did, and then they're doing new ACI numbers, which is fine. And obviously you don't want to leave it too late, because if you've only got a number of days, it gets difficult to upload in the document. So depending on the size of your trades, the number of different items in your invoices and so on, I think you'll naturally find a quite nice sweet spot. Around a month is what I see as happening by the time you've done all of the sort of negotiations and put everything together with the trade. You want to be doing it around a month. If too early, you're just definitely going to probably need to change it. Too late, it gets a bit worrying. You'll find that natural timing. But also the ACID numbers are free for the importer to make on the phaser. So if it does go completely different, just ask them to start it again rather than them changing lots of numbers and creating difficulty. It's free. They can have as many as they like. So from a personal point of view, if the trade was changing a lot, I would prefer to just say, look, let's start a new ACID number. It's not cost anyone any money. You know it's good, it's clean, and ready to go. CargoX. Okay, this is the only system that you'll log on and you'll use to. In their own words, CargoX is basically a digital courier service. Basically a really fancy emailing platform that tracks everything and logs all that detail for, I think it's over 10 years, which is the requirement. CargoX aren't involved in the trade in any way. They won't mind what you're sending, how you're sending it, what the sort of product is, if it's good, if it's bad, and if you've got the right documentation for that individual trade. They don't track that. What they do is onboard you in a way that we'll look at in a moment, so that the documentation that you upload, they are happy, and the Egyptian government are happy that they're willing to trust that user. With a number of bits in verification and your logons and passwords, they'll say, right, Mark's uploaded these 5 documents, it's attributed to this ACID number. We trust, because we verified him, that this documentation is true and it's accurate. When I press send on that envelope, it uses blockchain technology to stamp that on the web and pass that information over to the Phaser system. So, and that is where it leaves CargoX and goes to your importer. I'll go for the rest of the process now. We might come back to it. It will leave you. It's imprinted in the blockchain, which basically, for anyone that goes back to look, says now I have officially passed the ownership of this documentation and this trade over to my importer in Egypt. It's officially gone. He will receive that in his Phaser system. He then gets a chance, or they get a chance to check it. If they're happy with all the information, they can mark that as approved, and it then goes off to customs and they're ready to receive the document. If there are any issues at that point, he's like, oh, actually, you've got the invoice wrong, or they notice something that's wrong, they can ask you to send extra documentation along. That's a quick overview of the system. A quick one, the ACI number that you will receive. We go for it a bit. It is the only thing everywhere across the board that links everything together. There are places on your documentation, on the physical documents and in the system, you'd be able to put that number. You don't need to put it on all the documentation, but I don't see any reason why you shouldn't put it on all of the documentation. If a lot of these customs officers are new, we're 2 years in now, but they've been dealing with it a lot. They're still semi-new to this. Doing trading into Egypt, would rather know that that number is on everything. So if there are any problems or people put it up, it's easily trackable and they can follow it back, than leading to any problems out in customs. So our advice is keep it on everything, because it is the only number that links everything together. Okay. The next bit of what we're on here, we're just going to go through in. Actually, I'll ask the question out. Has anyone been using it a lot already? Are people verified on? What should I ask first? Who's used it or verified? Is there anyone?
We use it. We've been using it for a few years, obviously since it since it came out.
Yeah.
So sorry, my name's Glenn, by the way. I work for Sibelco UK.
Okay.
One a funny thing actually, one query we have is obviously you've stated that it makes all documents obsolete. The feedback we get from all of our customers in Egypt is that paper documents are still mandatory for customs, and customs are still demanding that they get delivered. And as much as I keep saying, well, the system was obviously implemented so that documents don't need to be sent, they still demand them. So we haven't really found a way to get around it. So we're paying for CargoX, obviously, per envelope, and then still sending paper documents out.
Yeah, like very good point. This is on absolutely. This is the idea is that it replaces documentation. There's a few points where it hasn't quite met up yet out in Egypt. So at the moment, customs have full sight of the documents that you send over with CargoX. What don't link up with that yet are people like the banks and further down the chain in when it's into Egypt and looking at that documentation. So it is work that they're doing at the moment. The banks are very slow, as we know, with any of the big banks here, taking on new tech and incorporating other things has been very slow. So Glenn, no, I do see that. And in theory, for your documents to land, having them legalized and just uploading them on CargoX will get it there. But there are still requirements in Egypt to have those documents legalized. So you are quite right. So at the moment, there is sort of this double requirement of doing this document. That will slow down and that will change. It's just as and when. So I do sort of feel your pain there a little bit, because there is this double requirement at the moment.
Because one thing we did find is that we obviously got customers that use letters of credit, customers that we do documentary collection and so on, but we do have customers with open terms. So even those customers are saying they still need the original document sent, which is fine. It's what we've been doing. However, some of the customers we were doing documentary collection on, where they have to physically obviously go to the bank, pick up the bills of lading and the rest of the documents before they can clear goods. What was happening is that somehow the goods were being cleared and all the documents being returned from the bank, so they weren't physically going and picking them up. So my question then was, well, if you really need the documents that badly, how are you clearing your goods?
Yeah.
So I think there's a little bit of, they want the documents physically, maybe as like a peace of mind, or because they've got another avenue, potentially. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good feedback, Glenn. No, I appreciate that as well. And that is yeah, there is difficulties. And this is why, although it's 2 years in, it still feels like a new system. I think around the world, and the chats I have with CargoX quite regularly are that it may not be CargoX, but all the countries around the world are going to start using systems like this. They'll all be similar on that target. And I think as certain countries get used to them more, Egypt are at the forefront. There's a few other countries CargoX are looking at, Singapore and a few others coming up. There's a few different systems.
And it's simplistic in its use. So, I've got no issues with the system. It's quite nice, to be honest. And if I don't have to send paperwork out, then fantastic.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get there one day.
Yeah, I think that will happen, Glenn. It will definitely happen. It's when the bank and the other bits set up. You imagine this project of going around implementing this for the whole world coming to Egypt. It's a huge project, and it hit a lot less. I think if you've been involved in it for a while, there was a staged sort of uptake from doing it only for sea trade, so you could still do it with air without it. And they pushed some bits back as they were testing, and it's still really 2 years in. I think we're still in the sort of coming together phase of it. It has meant to some more costs and more learning. A lot of people say to me, why do I need to learn a new system just for Egypt? I hope that this will be used around the world for other countries. So what you're learning now will be knowledge you can use elsewhere. And the costs will come down as I think the banks and the importers get more used to it, and the country gets more used to how these systems work. It will get better.
And the system is as simple as just drag and drop documents. It's just really easy to use. Seal an envelope and transfer it. So I don't have any issues with it. The occasional system error, but that's just normal with anything, isn't it?
That's good to hear, mate. No, that's good to hear.
No,
thank you for that. I think, and as well, probably on from that, and you might be able to actually, the only tricky bit is onboarding yourself the first time, getting verified, learning what the blockchain sort of code is and your key, and making sure you keep track of that. If you do the first bits well and think it through, I think from there it's quite easy carrying on from there.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Tracy, you've got your hand up. Have you got a question there?
Yeah, we've been using it sporadically for a few years. It seems to be only really the higher value shipments that they ask me to send the documents over like this. And just like Glenn, we also have to send paper copies by courier, which isn't a massive deal. But recently I was asked to re-upload everything and resubmit everything because the invoices, the electronic invoices weren't signed.
I had that exact problem, Tracy.
And that didn't happen the previous two times.
Do you know what the issue was?
What?
So the line item has a slight, almost like a colored line around it on our CargoX invoices. And
Yeah.
where we had inserted an extra product, it was only bringing through the one line that was actually highlighted, externally highlighted around the outside. So where we had added a line to the invoice, it had actually just inserted a line below where the template was.
Oh, okay.
And that was the issue. So when I actually realized that and then inserted the line correctly, and it was actually inside the colored box, the invoices were all uploaded correctly.
Okay.
So I don't know if that'll help you, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. I know a lot of the questions we get is around the invoicing, and people obviously, if you've got many line items, doing it on the Excel template is very time consuming. I'll ask a question a bit later on. Maybe Glenn and Tracy have used it, the automatic system. We'll come back to that in a little while. One other question, Tracy, when you resubmitted your documents, is that something you're doing now or something you've done in the past and fixed it?
I didn't actually do it. I went back to him saying, "No, they didn't ask for this last time round.
Okay.
Are you sure it's required? Because we'll have to pay again if we submit again." And they said they'd check, and I haven't heard anything since. So I've left that sleeping dog lying.
Cool. Okay. No news, good news. Sometimes that works.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on that, the reason I brought that up was for actually, if you're resubmitting documents on this same ACID, you won't have to pay twice. So if, for instance, and we'll look at the costs in a moment, I'll keep track of time as we're in this chat. But if there ever is a mistake, maybe you just upload the wrong document and don't check or miss one off, you can upload that under the same ACID number and it won't charge you anymore. You only get charged per envelope. And we'll jump onto that now, actually, while we're on the chat. I'll jump around a little bit because we've only got a certain amount of time. Okay. So the costings, which have actually just gone up recently, but are still, I think this is the newest numbers that I've got. Yes, I'm sure it is. So the way CargoX works is they use units rather than monetary values, but in any case, $1 is 1 unit. And it always equates to that. You can pay in euros and they do their own. I'd always recommend you to, when you buy credits, to do it in US dollars. I think they take about it's a 4% fee for using other currencies or for using it in euros. Now, when your costs, if you've never used CargoX before, you go through a verification process, which I'll try and look at very, very quickly right at the end, because that's some of the key points. And when you do that, it will cost you 15 units. That's a one-off. You go through a process. It checks all your information against what you've uploaded. And if all correct, you get a tick. And that allows the government and everyone then trusts you as the user and the company that the documents you're adding to the system are correct and that they will trust that and no more action is required. For each ACI filing, which, as Glenn said, is basically an envelope. It is an email. It's a super fancy email that can be tracked and can't be hacked. Basically, for each one of these envelopes that you put all your documents in, to when you actually send it, and for the fee of using the blockchain technology in CargoX, costs you 160 units. Now, for each document you upload, they will charge you 3 units, and it will go to a maximum of 15 units. I know that sounds quite complicated. I might explain it bad, but basically there's generally 5 documents you need to upload depending on what you do. You've got your you've got your packing slip, your invoice, your other invoice if you've done it in Excel format, and your bills of lading. But generally there's 5 that you'll always need to upload. Now, if you've got certificates for halal or medicine in bits or other EUR1 forms or anything like that, and you end up having to upload 10 documents, it will still only cost you the 15 units. So it will never go above that. So when you first, so for each ACI filing, I think I've done that wrong, will now cost you 175 units each time you do it. So it's $175 maximum for per or per envelope that you send over to Egypt. It will never cost you more than that. And like I said, and with Tracy, what she's got coming up now is if I completely messed it up and I just uploaded all the wrong documentation and needed to do all 10 documents again under the same ACI filing, it won't cost you any more. It will know that you've already paid that and just do it the same. And that is if you've just messed up one document or sort of all of them, it will appear in the importers and phaser system with that extra document, and they'll be able to check. Is there any other questions sort of around that or general ones before? Otherwise, I'll try and I'll nip through the sort of getting started and up to the verification point, which is where the main difficulties are, and jump around one of the live systems a little bit. Tracy?
Yeah, one more question. About the Excel version, I was told that that was mandatory as well, the Excel version of the invoice.
Yeah, it is indeed. And what there is though another platform. We'll come back to Glenn because he's, or anyone else, to see if he's done it. But there is a system now that will read PDF invoices, and it's using sort of AI technology that will help you fill in that form. That is absolutely mandatory, the Excel file. But there's a new system, and they're developing it and they're bettering it. I'd love to hear anyone's feedback on it so far. That will basically take all the information from your invoice. You upload 5, it learns about where your information is on that PDF invoice, and it will populate it into the Excel sheet for you. So I think you can find, have you
sorry,
had a go?
I tried it last time and it didn't work very well at all, and I ended up manually inputting it all anyway.
Okay. Yeah, no, nice. Well, yeah, that was the system. I was hoping I was going to help you with some pain. That system is evolving. It's come a long way since I first used it. Absolute shocker, but it's now getting better, and it will get better as it goes. Again, it depends. I work with some people that have big value shipments but have maybe one line item. It's easier just to fill in the form and put it uploaded. If you've got many line items, it might be worth trying to perfect it and getting useful for it, so it can save a lot of time. Jill, you had a question? Jill there? Jill Denaro? Raised your hand. Okay. Well, Jill, jump in if you get your audio going, come back. If not, were there any other questions around that? We'll look at the sort of verification for people that haven't used it before. Cool. Let's try and get this. I'm gonna whiz through this. And so okay, so this is what I've got a Sandbox account here, and we're going to quickly look at setting up a company and then getting verified, because this is the difficult bit. And I think as Glenn said, it's quite simple to use. Most of the questions we get is from the verification at the beginning, and then sort of getting the units in and being able to send it. But when you're verified, it's so easy from there on out, except the invoicing, which obviously Tracy's seen as well, and that is about 85% of the questions I get on the system. So the important thing about onboarding is when you first set up your account, there's 2 things you do. You create a company account, and then you create a user that's attached to that company. So the company account is really important. The information we put in here and the information we fill in, this needs to be very specific and exactly like your company information you have on places like Companies House and with your bank and so on. All the information we fill in here is then used when we go through the verification process and we spend those 15 units. It looks at all of that information and matches it all up. If it finds that information and it's happy, it's all correct, you get a tick within 15 minutes to sort of a day, worst case, and then you're ready to go on the system. If it doesn't, and it fails 3 times, you have to go through a longer process of submitting the documents manually, and that is quite vigorous and quite annoying when you don't need to. So making sure you set it up correctly at the beginning, filling out as much of this information as you know, your EORI numbers, if you have them. If you don't know what these are, probably you don't have them, so I wouldn't worry too much. But if you might have and you're just new at the job, or what, it's worth speaking to your colleagues and try and find out, because if you've got it, it's such an easy process. If it goes, the people I've had it go wrong with, and it's generally because I didn't think that mattered and I just did it quite quickly, it then becomes a big problem, and unraveling it just is loads of pain. Double check everything on the way in, really, really sort of easy process. Things like company logo is just for how your system looks. I'm going to try and just dump some info in here very quickly and see if we can go through. So first you create a company overview. What I need in there. Cool. And then you attach a user to it. This is the other bit as you go along, because it's so tracked and so well looked after, and the way you have to verify everything. Never share a login. It's free to have multiple logins, but it's good. In the future, you can turn them on, turn them off. You will know if things go wrong or anything comes back from your importer in Egypt. You'll be able to see who did it, maybe get an understanding of what went wrong, but create as many users as required, and then you can activate them in the back of the system and turn them off when sort of people leave. Ooh. And so now we're adding a user to that company. Nothing's been verified yet, but we're just sticking our information into the system and see it and set up that account. Okay. So when we first set up the system, what we've got now is a blank system. We've added a company and we've added one user to it. We'll see. But it's not able to do anything yet. It's all unverified. This is the next most important part of it, is this blockchain key. The other probably 10%, if 85% of it is in the verification, 10% of the problems people get is losing this key. You have a password to get into the system as your user, and then you have a blockchain key, which is a string of data that you import when you seal that envelope and send it over. That's particular to you and has a different password that we'd set up now. It can be different to your password when you first log into the system, and they can deviate and be completely different if you want. You can change your login to the into the system, but you can't change it to this one. And this key, after we've had it this time, can't be retrieved by CargoX. I think they were looking at changing that, but at the moment they can't retrieve that key. If you lose it or it gets deleted, you just have to start again with the account. So big thing I get with people is they log onto the system, verify their account, lovely, don't need to use it for 6 months, and then have deleted the key and have to go all again. So set this up, put it in a shared, key somewhere, a shared drive somewhere, or something you'll always have access to. So when starting up the key, we're going to create this new password for it. Okay. Next. Okay. And then it gives us the ability to download this key. So I'm going to download that. And we'll have a quick look at it. If you are having this problem of finding it, or later on, one of the key points that I've set out to people is it will put your name and it will call blockchain key in CargoX. So if you have lost it or someone's trouble finding it, using searches on your Mac or your PC for that, might be able to find it. But when you see what the actual look of a blockchain key is, it's just a load of random data. It's not something you're going to be able to figure out or sort of memorize. And that's what's made up of this blockchain key. And based on your user, only that code will allow you to lock that envelope and give it the trust for the importer to be able to see that document. If you don't have this and that password, it won't let you seal that envelope. I'll confirm I'll have it. We're just saying that CargoX can't recover it. This is our first test, and this is the same process you go through when you're locking an envelope. You put all your documents in the envelope, you seal it, and then when you're ready to send it, you'll basically be asked to upload your blockchain key, just like this. My computer. One. A number of times I show this and it goes wrong, so I'm glad that worked. Okay, so now what we have in the system, in this blank system, is we have a company account, we have a user account, and we have a blockchain key that we are ready to use. And we can, from here, we can create more users, which is down in platform users. You can simply add them here. It will send them out an email. They do the same process. So when you've done it and you know about the blockchain key, pass that information on to them, because they'll have their own blockchain key within that. Okay, and when the first person that signs on is an administrator. Everyone else that signs on will naturally become a user, and then you need to come into here. You'll find them down in private security, and you can change you can add their permissions, and you can activate they can activate their key. Very quickly, I'll open it to questions. I think this is the important bit for people that haven't used it, but for those that have, this is the bit. Company verification. You come into it, it's all lit up in red that you know you have to do it. You need to do this bank verification and then a third-party verification. This basically consists of the first time you buy any units, you need to do it via a bank transfer. Part of the verification process is them knowing that you own your bank and that it's come from that bank, and they can link those two together. They put in 1,500 units, where depending on the amount of trades you do, you can go big as you want. There's no particular big, there's no savings per unit if you buy more or not. And we know from our maths that to do the first one, I think it's 175, or is it 180? Right. So we can see for 200, slightly less than that, but I just haven't run the maths, is we can do the third-party verification. We can do one ACI filing as well. So if you're getting going and you don't do very many, it's sort of 200 units, or I'll try and do the maths in a moment to get the exact right amount, so you know you can do at least one trade. You can pay in euros, but they do charge a 3%, or US dollars. It's just a straight up amount for that. Last very bit is to do the in the first case, you have to do it via a bank transfer. There's no way around it. And the big thing to remember is make sure that you pay all the fees to transfer it. The amount of dollars they receive is the amount of units they'll get. So if you've told it to do 200 and you're getting charged $25, if they get 175, you'll get 175 units. There's no other way around it. So you just need to make sure you pay the fees. Put in your information of who you want to invoice to. Cool. And then it will create the sort of invoice for you. A few bits on that for depending on your purchasing department, who you want to get it sent to. It'll have information on there. It gives you a code. This is the other one people let themselves down on. You need to make sure that is in the payment reference number. It's the only way they will be able to link those payments to your account. That reference number is key. Don't put in your login or your email for your CargoX account. Make sure that it is the number that they've put on the invoice. Hope it'll show up here. Okay, let's get some through. Right, that's the big bit of setting up and going into detail. I think now, I know I've gone over time a little bit. I'm happy to stay on longer and answer any other questions, but I thought I'd open it now to any other questions. I know that sort of Glenn and Tracy had a few. Is there any other users that have been using it that has any sort of more in-depth questions or want to know more of the futures? Or I'm happy to sort of do a few more bits. No. All right. What I do, I'll leave it sort of free. Any questions that people have as we go along, jump in with them. If not, drop off the call sort of when you're happy, or I've bored you enough, because I'll go through a few more bits of the system for anyone that sort of wants to stay on. But if there are any questions about anything on Egypt, the future, the different sectors, or maybe what it is for you, you're welcome to ask now, or I'll pop my email. I've popped that in there. I think that's hopefully gone out to everyone. Do get in touch with me. I know I'll pass out sort of my notes from today to everyone as well, so they can have a look. I highly recommend you get a one-to-one with myself or one of my sort of relationship managers here, just to discuss, learn a bit about what you do. We can sort of say whether it's good. We'll give it very, very honest opinions. You know what, there's not much for you now, but we'll put you on our books and we'll sort of come back to you when it's more appropriate, or answer any of those questions. So do get in touch. We will reach out to everyone sort of suggesting, let's have a meeting, but do get in touch with us, and yeah, and try and lead that on, and we'll open up what Egypt is for you guys, and what the opportunities are there.
Just one question for me, sorry, Mark. So I work for a company called Drapiscan Systems. So what we've got an issue with, so I'm assuming this platform, because I've never used it, but would that be used for any free of charge shipments as well? Because what we do, we provide spare parts for the systems we already have in country. So what we have been struggling with really is sending anything high value to Egypt at the moment. So anything below, say, 2,000 US dollars, we are good to send via DHL. And we do use an agent in Egypt to clear the goods, but anything over that, we're really struggling. So I know we need to use letter of credits for any shipments over 5,000 US dollars now, but the issue we've got is we're not actually selling the goods, if that makes sense, because we've got warranty contracts and we need to provide those parts free of charge. So obviously we can't go through a letter of credit process.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying the value of the consignment is over $5,000, but you're actually having a zero value on the invoice.
Yeah. So yeah, we're providing the parts free of charge, but obviously there will be a commercial value on the invoice, but we're not charging the receiver in Egypt for the goods.
Okay, I see. And is it to your own company? Do you have a base in Egypt and it's to yourself and you distribute it, or is it to a third party?
No, so we do have an office in Egypt. They did recently get an import license, but I don't think they used it yet. So we do use an agent to clear the goods, but we send them to the customers in Egypt. So say military intelligence, we provide parts to them, but we can't use them as a consignee because they won't clear the goods for us. So we consign the shipments to the agent. They will then send it to our office and the office will send it to the customer.
Okay, I'm going to look at this one in a bit more detail for you, because I've got a few answers to that one, but I don't want to point you in the right direction. There are zero value goods you can do, because to clear it, they're going to want to see the documentation coming through the system. It's how we fill that in. I'll make sure I'll come back to you correctly on that. I will pop me an email if you got it in after. I will jump. I'll jump back to you quite quickly on that one, because with the warranty of goods, it might change as you've now got a base there with an import license. We might be able to do that very easily, but it is sometimes confusing. It breaks a few rules with their risk assessment software, which is probably where there's been some difficulty, because someone trying to import something with value of a zero cost, they're going to want some sort of tax based around that. So it's making sure it may be more of a tax question than anything else of how we deal with that. I'll jump back to you on that one though.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Any others from anyone else on the call for any bits of that, or more in-depth ones that I can do my best to answer? If not, me and the guys will come back to them.
I haven't got a question, but I'm just gonna let you know, like, thanks for the call. It's it's been great, but I'm gonna jump off now.
Cool. Oh, thanks for that, Emily. No, look, it's lovely to have you on. Do get in touch with these bits. Obviously, whether it's CargoX or whether it's anything in Egypt, whether you're new to using the systems or you've been here a long time, it's great just to get in touch with us. We love to know what business you guys are doing in Egypt as well. We pass it on to DBT. They love to highlight, and we do as well, highlight the trades that are happening to give some promotion. So if you're having some nice wins out in Egypt, a big, small, medium, or looking to expand, let us know. We'd love to sort of highlight those wins and see what more there is to, if you can get more work. It's not just the bad news and the help we can give you with to sort of get around that. But yeah, anything good you're doing as well, do let us know. We'd love to sort of showcase and highlight that to the rest of the UK network and in Egypt. So no, thanks.
Yeah, that's great. I've noted down your email, so yeah, then we'll be in touch at some point, I'm sure.
Lovely. No, Emily, no, thanks for being on board, Jen, coming over to listen about Egypt today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and guys, do drop off as you want as well. It's great. I hope we'll all follow up and have a chat as we go along. It's lovely getting the feedback. So I don't know how many of us are still here, but I'll go through. I'm happy to go through a couple of other bits as well, just so we can see what the envelopes look like for new people. So yeah, I'll continue slightly, maybe for 15 minutes. This view here was in a sandbox environment. So what I just did there was in a special thing that was made for us to sort of showcase how it works. But here is what a live system looks like when you've got it going. And you can see there I've got a set of units in there, and I'm verified because I've got the ticks, and that's what when you upload your logo, what that looks like. When you're setting up the trade, your importer will ask you for a lot of questions about it, what you're importing, what the values are, and so on. Like I said earlier, he will submit that into his system, and then it will give you this ACID number. When you have that number, you can come into Compose here, and you can create this envelope that we were all talking about earlier. There's a simple system here of you put in the 19-digit number. I always recommend copy and pasting it rather than typing it in because it's a big long number. And then the last bits I'll show you today is this is what I said with the 5 bits of information: the bills of lading, packing list, invoice, certificate of origin, and the XML invoice. That's the things, the minimums you need to upload. To upload the documents, upload new. Coming and find your PDF. What's a good one to do? You'll upload your document into it. Again, like I said, CargoX doesn't read or understand what that document is about. It won't know if the PDF is good, bad, if it's got any information on, or if it's a picture of your cat. It won't understand it. It will only know that it is a PDF document. You'll come into that document, we'll add the properties. We'll say that it is a invoice. We'll give it a document ID. Now, the document ID is whatever you've numbered that invoice. So if we've given it to our guys before that it was 1478, that's the number we want to put on it. And we can save that. It will tell you that costs 3 units. Then it never charges you at the point of uploading the documents, only when you send the envelope. So you can do this: upload 50 documents, delete all of them, do it all again, and it won't charge you. It will only charge you when you send the documents. Okay, that's uploaded now. Then it gives you a preview of it. That document's on there. You can upload your other documents as required. At the end of that, okay. At the end of it, you basically seal the envelope. You can send the envelope. Then it'll ask you for the blockchain key. That will go to your importer in Egypt, and it's at that point that it will charge you those the 175 units for sending that envelope. Right, I've I rode through that. I wanted to get to that bit just so sort of people that were new to it could see what the system and the envelope looks like. There's a few more bits in detail there. I know I'm sure Tracy and Glenn, who I think's dropped off as well, sort of had a few other headaches along the way. I'm happy if you get in touch to sort of talk you through any of these bits or have some sort of one-to-ones, but there's a general sort of sneak peek and a look into the system, why it's used, how it's put together, and what you'll be using in it. I hope that's given if not a brief sort of overview of Egypt, what's happening in Egypt, some of the opportunities that are available, and when you strive and you start getting on those opportunities, how to make these trades happen using the softwares. So yeah, look, I will, before I pass back to Max,